Hey guys, I'm doing another video and look at more evidence that we're in Satan's little season. This will be number 5 on the list. So we are getting into the second half of the top 10 list. And this series is part of a bigger study that we've been doing on my channel over the last few months, looking at the questions, trying to answer, has the millennial kingdom of Christ already occurred, and are we in Satan's little season? So let's get going. Number 5, more evidence that we're in Satan's little season. Santa Claus and modern day Christmas. We're going to look at the history of Santa Claus, and we are going to look at it from the vantage point of the last 250 years or so, from the late 18th century, which I feel was the end of the millennial kingdom of Christ and the beginning of Satan's little season, until present, and see the evolution of Santa Claus and how we celebrate Christmas. And during this study, during this video, I want to see what is behind this jolly old elf and what's he truly hiding. Is it simply Satan just trying to get the Christ out of Christmas, or is it something much deeper? And so let's get to it. Who's your secret Santa that we do today in our traditions? But we could also put a comment there and say, who's your secret Santa? Because I feel Santa is hiding someone and a group of people in our past. And it's also hiding possibly where they resided, where they reigned, and possibly where they are today. Now, some people view Santa as a modern day deified Nimrod. And you can see here, Nimrod and Santa share having a tree symbol, a long beard, holding a reindeer, and many people feel or believe that Nimrod's birthday is on December 25th. We're not going to look at it from that viewpoint. Some people look at Santa Claus as a modern day Odin, as you see here on the left, the Norse god, also known as the Allfather or Yule Father, and the modern evolution to what we know today as Santa Claus, Father Christmas. We're not going to look at it that way either. Some look at Santa Claus as simply an idol like Moloch, and we give our kids over to sit in Santa's lap, and as it's like we're giving our kids over to the god Moloch. And you can see here how we torture our kids. And look at some of these faces. Look at the sinister Santa Claus right here. But look at the pure fear in these kids' faces. Here and here, this kid just wants to get out of Santa's lap. This one too. This one too. This one is holding up his hand or her hand. Can't wait to get out of Santa's lap. We should listen to our kids sometimes. I mean, look at this guy right here. No wonder she's absolutely terrified. Kids have pretty good instincts a lot of times. They cry about a lot of stuff, but they have pretty good instincts. For instance, clowns at birthday parties. I mean, what are we doing? Giving our kids to clowns that have demonic references, and then taking our kids to the doctor and getting a couple of dozen shots their first 2 years of life. Look at this kid's terrified, But this is what happens in the world these days. We're in Satan's little season, and we should listen to our kids. They know more than we do sometimes. But let's get back to it. I digress, but let's get back to how Santa Claus got to this point today. If we go back to the Middle Ages, we see Saint Nicholas here. And this is Saint Nicholas, and you can see a lot of pictures of Saint Nicholas. You can see here Saint Nicholas, and the saints always have the halos, with the Byzantine Empire, this 1,000 years that the history books will tell you as the Dark Ages, but we see angels and saints with light emanating from them, halos. I did a video on that. I think these saints were the glorified saints, the martyrs who were resurrected at the time of Jesus' second coming, at the first resurrection of the saints. You can see him here holding back a sword. You can see him, St. Nicholas here, hitting idols down and knocking idols down off a pedestal. And you see St. Nicholas a lot in boats traveling by sea. But this is St. Nicholas of Myra. There's a lot of legends behind him, but he was basically known as a gift giver and a very charitable saint or bishop. But is there more to it? And again, I think so. I think that St. Nicholas was part of a group of saints, again, that were resurrected at the time of the second coming of Jesus Christ. I think this is part of what they are trying to hide from us today through the modern day celebration of Christmas and Santa Claus. You can see here saints intermingling with mortals during the time of the millennial kingdom of Christ. You know, the time where they sing joy to the world, the Lord is come. In these angelic architectural buildings like St. Peter's Basilica that wasn't built when it said it was, but rather was built, I believe, by these angelic saints for the purposes of worship and possibly, like I've speculated in the past, free energy from themselves, possibly as a power source. Besides joy to the world, they were singing songs like this. When the saints go marching in, I want to be in that number. When the sun begins to shine, I want to be in that number. When the moon turns red with blood, I want to be in that number. Oh, when the trumpet sounds the call, I want to be in that number. And was that number the 144,000? Were they part of this millennial kingdom of Christ that we see throughout our history, throughout our architectural records, throughout our art records? And with angelic beings possibly being a part of this reign during the 1,000 years. But the St. Nicholas that I believe was part of this 1,000-year reign of Christ during the millennial kingdom has now turned into these people, beginning with Sinterklaas and turning into Father Christmas and now modern day Santa Claus. The real turning into something mythical. A place that possibly they reign from and possibly still are today, becoming a mythical place also, as we'll see. So now it goes from St. Nicholas Day to Sinterklaas. And Sinterklaas was the figure of St. Nicholas as we see this transition to our modern day Santa Claus. This was of Dutch origin. He rode a white horse often, had a red mitre on his hat, and often had a long white beard. But now, because of this perversion of something real in our past to hide it, we have the modern day Santa Claus that lives at the North Pole. And this is part of the Christmas deception. This is what the Illuminati, Luciferian Freemasons don't want you to know. They don't want you to know what's happened in your past, and they don't want you to know what season you're in. And so they put a mask on the past, pass it off as Santa Claus, and then tell you season's greetings. But what season are we greeting? Is this talking about the greeting, the beginning of the little season that was kicked off at the loosing of Satan from the bottomless pit, the season that we're now in, as we've seen throughout this series so far? Believe in the magic, and that's what this is. We are living in the magic kingdom right now. This is all deception and deceit that we see. So let's see how the modern day American Santa Claus came to be. And it began in the early 18th century by Clement Clarke Moore's "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and we still recite this poem today. But it was originally known as A Visit from St. Nicholas. And you can see here A Visit from St. Nicholas by Clement Clarke Moore. This was written in 1823. Just earlier than that was Washington Irving's portrayal of Santa Claus. You can see him here. You can see him with a top hat next to him. Is this a wand? I wonder. But Washington Irving was known for many books. He was known for The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And also, during that time period, he wrote many Christmas essays. And numerous amount of these essays are collected in a book by Washington Irving, Old Christmas. And these were written in the early 19th century. And during these essays, he was the first to really describe Santa as a jolly old elf and portrayed him as a pipe-smoking, short, fat, stocky man. Moving forward, we see Charles Dickens here. And Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol. He wrote this in 1843. And we still see movies about the Christmas Carol with Scrooge today. But Charles Dickens was part of the occult. And you can see, again, the top hat. These are occultists, and they are part of the deception. Charles Dickens was part of the Ghost Club, and we know from previous videos, such as with the Modern Bible translations, with Westcott and Hort being part of the Ghostly Guild. These are all wizards, and they use the magic of words to sway people's thoughts, sway their minds into believing the lie of Santa Claus. Let's continue. Going to the mid 19th century, Louisa May Alcott, famous for Little Women. And let's look at Louisa May Alcott here. Let's get a good look at Louisa May. Well, Louisa May, 10 years earlier, not only wrote several other books, but wrote Christmas Elves in 1855. And she was the first to describe the Christmas elves. A couple of years later, she wrote The Wonders of Santa Claus. And during The Wonders of Santa Claus, she tells how Santa keeps a great many elves at work. And you can see here a portrayal of that book. I believe she was turning the saints into mythological creatures, the elves, at Santa's workshop. But that began to further the mythology of Santa Claus and his elves at his workshop. Of note, just a few years later, after writing Little Women, Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Men. And there again is a portrait of Louisa May Alcott. And I can't say that name. Life at Plumfield with Joe's Boys. All right, so what Washington Irving, Clement Clarke Moore, Charles Dickens, and Louisa May Alcott began, they started it, they furthered it, but what topped it off in the 19th century was Thomas Nast. And Thomas Nast was an illustrator for the Harper's Weekly. And this was a weekly journal put out, circulated, the Journal of Civilization, as you can see right here, started by Fletcher Harper in 1850. And he hired Thomas Nast as an illustrator. And throughout the years of 1863 to 1886, Thomas Nast designed and illustrated 33 covers with Santa Claus on it on the Harper's Weekly. And you can see here Santa Claus just coming down the Christmas chimney hand in hand with Mother Hubbard. Another figure that began in that day. And we can see more renditions of Mother Hubbard. This was a gift, another gift given to us by the French, as Mother Hubbard contained French poems translated into English. So the French gave us not only the Statue of Liberty, but Mother Hubbard. But getting back to Thomas Nast and his 33 illustrations of Santa Claus, one of these was famous because of its recruitment during the Civil War. And you can see here Santa Claus with Ulysses S. Grant and the Northern Army. Ulysses S. Grant, a Freemason, but you can see in the background, welcome Santa Claus, Santa sitting on his sleigh with reindeer with a star there. I find that interesting. You know, Jesus' birth signified by the Star of Bethlehem. Here in the background, you see what looks like 3 crosses with a larger one in the middle. And in the forefront, you see Santa Claus. What's also interesting is the title of this is Santa Claus in Camp. And is it possibly talking about the camp of the saints? Or an allusion to that? So, over the 19th century, with these illustrators and writers and St. Nicholas, the previous true saints of the millennial kingdom have been converted or are being converted into what we know today as the Santa Claus figure. And we are not too many generations from when Christmas officially was declared a United States holiday. Just a few generations. It has not been that long ago. It wasn't until after the Civil War where December 25th was declared a federal holiday in the United States. And we started celebrating truly Christmas like we do today. You can see here a family in the late 1800s around a Christmas tree. But what also, besides the illustrations of Santa Claus that Thomas Nast portrayed in Harper's Weekly, he was the first to really solidify Santa living in the North Pole. Santa Clausville, North Pole. the North Pole that they tell you today has nothing up there but cold, frigid ice. Well, what's interesting during this time of the 19th century, throughout the 1800s, the Arctic had almost a mythical status about it for whatever reason. I can't imagine why. But there were many Arctic explorations performed during the 1800s. Between the mid to late 1800s, there were 5 major polar expeditions, and all of them supposedly failed and went disastrously wrong. You can see here photos of Arctic explorers with their dogs and a boat behind them. And I've looked through a lot of these old photos, and they all look very staged to me. But again, during this time, during the first few generations of Satan's Little Season, for whatever reason, everybody was searching for the Arctic Grail. The Quest for the Northwest Passage and the North Pole. You can see here a book written by Pierre Berton between 1818 and 1909, describing all the many polar Arctic expeditions. The Quest for the North Pole. Why go to the North Pole? What were they looking for? Were they looking for Santa and his elves? Or were they looking for something else? Were they looking for the Northwest Passage to try to get somewhere? Possibly where the camp was, and possibly where the camp is. Well, leading into the late 19th century, going into the 20th century, Robert E. Peary was most famous for going on an Arctic exploration. You can see Robert Peary here. You can see Robert Peary here with his wife. We'll look at Robert Peary's wife. Robert Peary was a Freemason. Here's another picture of Robert E. Peary's wife, who went along with him on many of these explorations. And you can see here a book, Robert E. Peary, The North Pole, its discovery in 1909 under the auspices of the Peary Arctic Club. And all of the supposed findings of the North Pole all went under scrutiny. There was always controversy around them. Did they truly reach their goal? Did they truly find the North Pole? And you can see here again photos from Arctic explorations. The flag bearers, they're at the center of the North Pole, supposedly. Again, it looks very staged. Reminds me of photos like this, to be honest. Which was led by another Freemason, Buzz Aldrin. But the Freemasonry doesn't stop there. In the early 20th century, Richard Byrd began his exploration, and he was a naval officer and aviator, most famous for exploring Antarctica. And he was born, Richard Byrd, a Freemason, in 1888 and passed away in 1957, just after this healthy person had just explored the Antarctic. So he dies after getting back from Antarctica in his sleep from an apparent heart attack. And then the next year, the United Nations gets together and every country agrees for the first time that there should be an Antarctic treaty where nobody can go there. What did they find there? I wonder. This world hadn't agreed on anything. The only thing they've agreed on since the Antarctic Treaty is that the COVID shot was safe and effective. But Byrd, most noted for his Antarctic exploration, previous to that, circled the North Pole in a plane. You can see here in the San Francisco Chronicle in 1926, Byrd circles North Pole in plane, flies 620 miles in 16 hours on a non-stop dash. Now afterwards, again, many people question whether he truly did this flight that fast and circled the North Pole or not. Again, always controversy in what they find in the North Pole in the 19th and early 20th century. But the North Pole here, with Santa Claus standing on top of the world, around the world with Santa Claus, this spinning ball globe Earth with this mythological Santa Claus going around delivering presents, completely changed, I believe, what our true history is in this narrative. And so now everybody just knows, because they tell us, that the North Pole is nothing but frigid ice. And just believe it. Just like believe in Santa Claus, kids. Let's indoctrinate you as soon as you're a kid, as soon as you get out of the crib, on Santa Claus. And we all get our kids believing in Santa Claus. But this is what truly is being done in Satan's Little Season with the narrative of Santa Claus. But if you look at medieval maps, quote, medieval maps, in the Dark Ages, the 1,000-year period that nothing good happened, well, you'll find that there's many depictions of land in the center here. And you can see here the famous Mercator map from 1595 with the Arctic Pole here, the Rubra Negra, that many of you guys have looked at, know about. Possibly was this where the camp of the saints was? Was this where the beginning of the millennial kingdom occurred? Was this where Jerusalem was at that time, the city of peace? And that the city of peace and the saints and angels that emanated from it throughout the 1,000 years went to the world, spreading the good news of Jesus Christ and building this angelic architecture used for worship of our Savior Jesus Christ, and possibly again for free energy. Here's another map. This is from just a couple of years previous to the Mercator map, the Gerard, the Gerard de Jode map of 1593. But again, very similar from a cartographer standpoint. You can see Europe here, going into Asia, North America, Mexico, South America, Africa here. But you see land in the center. And there are many other maps within the last few hundred years, which I believe were part of the millennial kingdom of Christ, that depicted Jerusalem in the center of the quote world. You can see a map here depicting that. You can see a map here depicting that, with Jerusalem in the center. Another map with Jesus, possibly Michael and Gabriel, with Jerusalem in the center. is this where the Millennial Kingdom began and spread from. After the destruction of Jerusalem and the Old Covenant and the fall of Rome, where the feet of iron and miry clay were crushed with the stone, and the stone became a great mountain, was this the beginning of the Millennial Kingdom, and is this where it started? Is this part of what they're trying to hide with the Santa Claus story? You can see more maps with Jerusalem in the center. Jerusalem, city of peace. But again, this is what they want you to believe after all the Arctic explorations during the early generations of Satan's Little Season, kicking off this narrative of Santa Claus. Ultimately, today, if you polled, no pun intended, 100 people, almost all of them will tell you North Pole is at the top of a spinning globe and is nothing but cold water and ice. Here's a picture of the heavens with the North Star, Polaris. And you can see the stars circling the central star, Polaris. And you can see the aurora borealis. And you can see Santa Claus here in the North Pole with the aurora borealis. They tell us one thing about how these northern lights are formed, but possibly it could be light emanating from the throne of God above the firmament. As we see here in Revelation 4:3, and he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone, and there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. So now let's get to 20th century Christmas. And what the 19th century artists like Thomas Nast and the writers like Charles Dickens and Washington Irving, Norman Rockwell continued to solidify Santa Claus in our modern day Christmas celebrations. You can see here Santa Claus in the earliest 20th century, artistic renditions drawn by Norman Rockwell. You can see him looking at the North Pole with a magnifying glass, with a book in his hand that says, "Good Boys." And Norman Rockwell, like Thomas Nast, did many sketches and drawings for the Saturday Evening Post. Not the Harper's Weekly like Nast did, but the Saturday Evening Post, depicting Santa Claus. I don't know if he did 33 or not, but he did a lot. And many of them we know from our past Christmases. But Norman Rockwell is also a Freemason. And you can see him here drawing or painting the square and compass Masonic logo on a lantern in honor, most likely, of their light bearer, Lucifer. Again, they're in a club. And here later in the Saturday Evening Post, becoming more modern, this in the 1950s, we see Norman Rockwell's famous photo of an adolescent girl with a black eye. And if you've studied the Black Eye Club, you'll know just how sinister that innocent looking Saturday Evening Post mid 20th century cover is. But this is what they do. They try to cover for the past that they know and the season that they're in, and try to hide it from everybody through illustrations and novels and the media. Again, Santa Claus and Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola was part of modern day Santa Claus and furthering the myth of Santa Claus to children around the world. And Santa Claus began to pop up in many advertisements. This one for Mason's wine essences for Xmas and New Year especially, but suitable for any time. Good, it's Mason's. And how about this Mason's wine essences advertisement? For 6 pence, you can buy a bottle which will make 60 glasses in 6 minutes. So you have 666 references of a Mason's wine essence advertisement with a dopey old Santa Claus figure marketing it. And obviously, this was the first Santa Claus movie in 1898 with the modern motion picture and televisions beginning in the 20th century. We began to see Santa Claus movies, and this is The Night Before Christmas that was made in the early 20th century. Basically the poem by Moore, what's his name? Clement Clark Moore. And now we just get to, there's so many movies today about Christmas. I mean, we've seen a lot of these. But again, this is the fabric that Satan's Little Season gives us here. And that's how true saints of the past and where they are, where they were, gets turned into figures like this, and finally mythological figures like Santa Claus. And this is hidden from us. Don't believe in what our real history, what happened. Believe in this mythical tale of Santa Claus, kids. And Macy's parades, Santa giving out gifts, and one night taking his sleigh and reindeer led by Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer all over the world, giving cheer and gifts to everybody. You can see all the gifts of our modern Christmas era. You can see Benjamin Franklin here, a Freemason, and one of the first with a Santa's hat. You can see Andrew Jackson. You know, we want to do a $20 Christmas gift at an office party. Pull out an Andrew Jackson that has a Freemason on the front and old world architect buildings on the back. And in a few years, maybe they are going to finally change the $20 bill. Like they put up every year in Congress, and change it from Andrew Jackson to Harriet Tubman. But to wrap this up, I don't think that Santa is specifically Satan just trying to get Christ out of Christmas. I think, again, it goes much deeper and is part of Satan's little season and the deception that occurs. Obviously, let's keep Christ in Christmas. When we celebrate Christmas, let's keep Christ at the focus. One last thing, let's go over the good news. of Christ. Are you on Santa's naughty or nice list? See, Santa has it all wrong. He is making a list and checking it twice and is going to see who's naughty or nice and give presents to good boys and girls, but give coal and no presents to bad boys and girls. So be good for goodness sake for Santa Claus, right? Because he's making a list and checking it twice. And you can see here, oh, you better watch out. You better not cry, better not pout. I'm telling you why. Jesus Christ is coming again. And at the bottom, that guest speaker at church on Sunday looked and sounded very familiar. So, some people will say that Santa's a false prophet because he's teaching a false gospel. And Jesus Christ is coming again. Just because this eschatology viewpoint of being in Satan's little season puts us further down the prophetic timeline doesn't mean that Jesus Christ is not coming back. There are many things ahead. There is the resurrection at the last day after the camp of the saints is surrounded, after Jesus comes down with New Jerusalem and a new heavens and new earth is established. All those things are in our future. We have a lot to look forward to as believers in Christ. But when Santa learned the gospel, for by grace are you saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. Sorry about that. That got to me. The free gift is so precious. The mercy and grace of Jesus Christ, so precious. I like this meme here, and I like it. It's by the Catholic link. What are you carrying? Many gifts for everyone. Jesus says, I only carry one, but it's enough for everyone. That's good to see on a Catholic link. By grace through faith in Christ alone. The precious gift. But Jesus is the reason for the season. Keep Christ in Christmas. But also understand that we can look at this another way. Jesus is the reason for the season. The season's greetings by these Freemasons of Satan's little season. Ultimately, they are trying to hide Jesus' second coming and the millennial kingdom. They're trying to hide that we are in Satan's little season, and they're trying to hide what is to come. That is the secret that all these deceptions that we see in Satan's little season revolve around. Hiding our past through the dark ages, which was the millennial kingdom of Christ, knowing where we are in the prophetic timeline and what's to come. They know that we're in Satan's little season of deception, but they don't want you to know it. But hopefully with this series and continued videos, some of which I might have foreshadowed in this one, Santa's secret hopefully is getting out of the bag. So we'll do another video soon. God bless.